Hello and welcome back to the channel. A few months ago, I added a question link in the description video of my YouTube channel, or each of the videos, where I gather retiree questions that people submit anonymously. And the first question I got was simply, how much do I need to retire? And I left that question on the Q&A list for a while. I thought that's going to be a little bit difficult. I need more information to be able to answer this question. But I wanted to circle back to it today because I do think that you can get within the ballpark without having to, gather a ton of additional information. And I think that this is a good way to approach the question of retirement when you're just sort of starting out. And what I'm going to do in today's video is I'm going to apply a famous retirement withdrawal rule called the 4% rule. Very controversial. A lot of research has come out since it was initially published that says why it's probably not the most effective way to create and architect a retirement income plan. But I do still think that it has its uses. I'm going to put it to its uses today, and hopefully you find it helpful as you figure out how much you're going to need to retire. So let's start with, what is the 4% rule? So back in the mid-90s, a financial advisor named Bill Bengen did his own research to determine what's the most amount of money that a retiree could withdraw from a portfolio of 50% equities and 50% fixed income over a 30-year retirement and not run out of money. And the result of that research was that if a retiree started out retirement and withdrew 4% of the starting balance in year one, and then each subsequent year increased the withdrawal by the rate of inflation, that they would be able to get through a 30-year retirement without running out of money, even in the most negative or down sequence of returns over that 30-year time horizon, sort of the worst 30-year run of returns for a prospective retiree. So that was sort of the genesis or the origin of the 4% rule. He published his research, and a lot of people are using it as a guidepost to kind of help them figure out how much they're going to need to retire. And as I mentioned at the outset of the video, it has drawn a lot of criticism, the effectiveness of the rule in implementation when you venture outside of the United States and include things like Canadian and international stocks, non-US bonds, other asset classes. Are investment returns in the future going to look like they are in the past? These are all valid questions and criticisms of the rule. But again, I do think that it is useful for the individual or couple that's sitting across the dining room table or at a coffee shop or on a Teams meeting with an advisor in their first meeting and saying, hey, can you just sort of get us in the ballpark? Like, how much you think we're going to need to make this work? And so I'm now going to use the 4% rule for a prospective hypothetical retiree couple that asks me this question. And I have answered this question before for people in meetings to kind of get them started. So it's exactly how I would approach that question. So let's start with a hypothetical couple. They're going to be 65 years old and they're about to retire, or they're planning to retire imminently. And they simply ask the question to me, how much do you think we're going to need to make our retirement work? And the question that I typically start with when it comes to the numbers and retirement is, how much are we going to need to generate for you on an after-tax basis in your bank account each month to make your retirement life unfold the way that you want? How much money do you need to have coming into your bank account? And in our hypothetical case, we're going to say that our couple says they need to have $8,000 of after-tax money coming into their bank account each month in order to make their retirement work. Okay, so $8,000 per month is our starting point. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to back out from that $8,000 per month how much we think they're going to get from other guaranteed sources of income. The big ones here, if both members of the couple worked consistently throughout their working years, is going to be Canada Pension Plan coupled with old age security, which they are going to get simply by being Canadian residents throughout the majority of their lives. And let's just assume that for our example that this 65-year-old couple has lived in Canada throughout their entire life. For old age security, we're going to estimate they're going to get around $700 per month each coming in, and for a Canada Pension Plan, we'll assume that they're going to have around $1,200 per month coming in. So from those two guaranteed sources, we expect that they're going to get around $3,800 per month, coming into their bank accounts from Canada Pension Plan and old age security. So what we do is we back that $3,800 per month out of their $8,000 need, which leaves $4,200 of retirement income that now needs to be handled by distributions from their portfolio. So what we do next is we take that monthly amount and turn it into an annual amount, which becomes $50,400. And then applying the 4% rule, we figure that if we simply take the $50,400 annual withdrawal, divide that by 4%, that gives us the answer to the question, how much do we need to have in the portfolio, such that if we take 4% out in the first year, that we we are able to achieve that $50,400? So the answer to that question is $1,260,000 is going to need to be in the portfolio. So that in year one, when they take out $50,400, that works out to 4%. Now, if this hypothetical couple is like most retirees who have, $1 million to $2 million saved up for retirement, we're going to assume that the bulk of those assets is in pre-tax accounts. And here we're thinking about things like RSPs and RIFs. So we're going to buffer up that 1.26 million by about 15% to account for income taxes in retirement. So let's just say that this hypothetical couple who has CPP and OAS that wants to retire at 65, applying the 4% rule, says that they need somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million saved up for retirement to satisfy their need. And this is where, in my opinion, the usefulness of the 4% rule comes to a close, because there's lots of other factors that are going to play in that, to me, necessitate a more detailed plan, built with more robust assumptions built into it. I'm going to list some of the factors here. But what the 4% rule does is it doesn't necessarily account for all other sources of income. So let's say that the retiree is going to have some part-time work early in retirement, or they're going to have some other pension income coming in. So there's other factors here that we need to take into account for each individual situation. There might be other cash flows coming into their plan. So if the couple has another property that they're planning to sell down the road that's going to generate some capital for their plan, that would change the calculation of how much they need to have saved up to make the necessary withdrawals from their portfolios. Inheritances, I've put on my notes here, a little bit more difficult to plan for. You want to be really sure that that inheritance is coming in before you make decisions around how much you want of that to factor into your retirement plan. But I raise that because there are other cash flows that can be factored in, should be factored into a retirement income plan that might sort of reduce the usefulness of a simple rule like the 4% rule. I've listed asset allocation here. So 50% stocks, 50% bonds was the asset allocation that Bill Bengen used in his research. But depending on that retiree's ability, willingness, need to take risk, they may have either more conservative or more aggressive portfolio. A more conservative portfolio would require that the retiree lower their expectations around how much income that they take out of their retirement income portfolio. The more aggressive they are, they may be able to push those numbers up a little bit. But all that to say that asset allocation matters, and to simply say, hey, I can take 4% out, ignoring asset allocation doesn't make a ton of sense. Next one is taxes. So we talked about taxes a bit earlier. I used a 15% sort of plug number for taxes. But if the 1.5 million is mostly or all in pre-tax accounts, that's going to change the amount that they're going to need to have in their portfolio. If they're half or mostly in non-registered accounts or after-tax accounts or tax-free savings accounts, those are more favorably taxed, or the distribution of those are going to be more favorably taxed. So that would maybe have them require less money to start at retirement to support the same levels of spending. And then finally, the big one, changing spending needs. So this hypothetical couple said, hey, we want to spend $8,000 after tax for life. In my experience working with retirees, spending needs do evolve and change through retirement. So they may front load a lot of their, exciting spending like expensive travel, active hobbies, maybe take up more money early in retirement. Later in retirement, spending needs may not go down, but they certainly may change. You may have more out-of-pocket medical costs you need to account for. But to assume that simply, spending is going to stay static throughout retirement, it's one of the flaws or very least drawbacks of a simple rule like the 4% rule. So call to action, what do we do with this information? So I think that the 4% rule can be useful for kind of getting you started. And if you're trying to figure out the answer to the question, how much do I need to retire? And I was giving somebody, a bit of advice, like where to start from, I'd say, try to figure out how much you're going to need to have coming in every month to allow you to live the life you want to in retirement. I think that's a really important starting point. From there, you can build in some assumptions around your other income sources. We've talked about Canada Pension Plan, Old Age Security. There's ways that you can get estimates for what your Canada Pension Plan is going to be. I've talked about that in previous videos as well. But let's look at what other resources you're bringing to the table outside of the portfolio that's going to help make up that retirement income plan. Step number 3, you can apply the rule to get you in the ballpark. But I think that the big takeaway here, number 4, is once you're in the ballpark, I think that's when you need to start maybe doing some of the like sharpened pencil work, like more detailed work to make that analysis work specifically for your plan so you can rely on it. I think that's when bringing in somebody like a experienced financial planner, that can really make a big difference for you. Even if you decide that you ultimately want to go ahead and manage those assets in that portfolio in retirement on your own, I think that the role of an advisor in this phase is important to sort of maybe help you, build some solid assumptions and a solid plan around what you're trying to achieve, what resources you're going to need to bring to the effort, and sort of get you, going on the right track. Hopefully you found this video to be helpful. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. Leave me any questions or comments below, and I'll speak with you soon. Take care.